The famine of 1931-1933 is one of the main disasters for Kazakh people. According to various estimates, between 2.5 million and 3.25 million Kazakhs died during this time, which was approximately 40% of the entire population. The official reason for the famine is the policy of destruction of the kulaks as a class, which implied the forced confiscation of livestock from the kulaks, rich people, for the benefit of the state. Although dispossession was the main reason, it is also important to note that it was not only one. The ban of nomadism, harsh pressure from the government, and lack of proper infrastructure also contributed. Studying the causes and consequences of the famine, not only in Kazakhstan but also in the entire USSR, we noticed a pattern that the famine affected only certain territories of the USSR, while Moscow and the regions around Leningrad suffered the least, which led us to the idea that the famine of 1931-1933 was not a coincidence, but a crime against humanity. We'll further analyze the sequence and cause in the presentation.
20th and 30th of the 20th century, a policy of collectivization and industrialization was pursued to transform the USSR into a developed and modern state. Collectivization is the process of uniting peer-to farms into large collective farms such as collective and state farms, in order to increase agricultural production and improve management. Industrialization is the process of large-scale industrial development during which there is a transition from an agrarian society to industrial state. This leads to urbanization and the development of various industries. To better understand causes and consequences of famine in Kazakhstan, I think we should make comparative analysis with Holodomor in Ukraine.
In Kazakhstan, collectivization meant the forced settlement of nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples. Kazakhs who had lived off livestock herding for centuries were told to abandon their way of life and join collective farms. The result? Over 90% of the livestock perished. Grain requisitions imposed from Moscow left people with nothing. By 1933, an estimated 1.3 to 1.5 million people, more than a third of the Kazakh population, were dead. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, a different but no less horrifying famine unfolded. Ukraine was the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, but when grain quotas could not be met, the state confiscated food reserves, seeds, and even personal supplies. Villages were blacklisted and movement was restricted. The internal passport system prevented starving peasants from fleeing to the cities. By the end of the 1933, up to 4 million Ukrainians had perished.
Execution and policy specifics. Both famines were resulted from forced collectivization, excessive grain requisitions, state violence, and repressions. But in Kazakhstan, policies were often based on misunderstanding and neglect, rather than deliberate ethnic targeting. Soviet officials saw Kazakh nomadism as backward, and were striving to transform it, resulting in massive suffering. Ethnic Kazakhs were blamed for their own backwardness. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the famine was compounded by deliberate punitive policies. Some historians, notably Raphael Lemkin, originator of the term genocide, argue it was an attempt to destroy Ukrainian national identity. Policies targeted grain-producing peasants with a national component. Recognition and legacy. In Kazakhstan, the famine remained a suppressed topic until recent decades. Now it is increasingly acknowledged as a national tragedy, though still not officially labeled genocide. Soviet response blamed kulaks and mismanagement. In Ukraine, the Holodomor is central to national identity. It is officially recognized as genocide by Ukraine and many other countries. Soviet response denied famine's existence. Foreign journalists were restricted. Aftermath, it has resulted to massive demographic changes and completion of sedentarization in Kazakhstan. In Ukraine, it deepened national trauma and reinforced anti-Soviet identity.
In the context of food crisis caused by collectivization, the Stalinist leadership deliberately used Kazakhstan as a strategic source of meat and livestock to supply the largest cities of the Soviet Union, Moscow, Leningrad, and other industrial centers. According to archival data, in 1931 and 33 to 40% of the meat consumed in Moscow came from Kazakhstan. In February-March 1931, 53% of meat delivery to Moscow and 43% to Leningrad came from this region. This data shows that despite the mass famine in Kazakhstan itself, its resources were purposefully withdrawn and redirected to maintain the food security of the elite cities that were at the top of Stalin's consumption hierarchy. Thus, the Kazakh population turned out to be not just a victim of collectivization, but a group deliberately sacrificed for the survival of more predatory social strata and territories from the point of the view Soviet authorities.
Comparing historical facts and reports, it can be assumed that the famine of 1931-1933 in Kazakhstan and other regions of USSR could have been not only a consequence of unsuccessful agricultural policy, but also a deliberate step of the part of the Soviet government, in which certain residents were sacrificed for the sake of supplying the central regions of the country, although there is no official recognition of this strategy as genocide by the USSR. There is numerous indirect evidence, including a disdainful attitude towards Kazakhs in official documents, ignoring the humanitarian catastrophe and the violent destruction of the traditional way of life. All these factors taken together increase suspicions about the innocence of the Stalinist administration in the mass death of the Kazakh population, up to 40% of the entire ethnic group. Nevertheless, the question of whether this famine was the greatest crime against humanity or the result of tragic combination of mistakes remains open. The answer to it perhaps will only be given by further research and historical understanding.